What should we make of the Buffalo Bills linebacker core entering the 2022 season? I'm breaking down the dynamics of the position group today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you are joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. Well, today our conversation is going to be focused around the Buffalo Bills linebacker core. We're going to talk Tremaine Edmunds, Matt Milano, Terrel Bernard, the depth, and of course, look at it through the four different angles that we've done for all the position groups to this point, where we reflect on 2021, we identify what's new and what that tells us about the vision for this group. We'll dig into the biggest questions now and in the future, and then close things out with my expectations for the unit. So let's start by reflecting on last season. And like I said on the defensive line podcast, my big emphasis here is to focus in on those prevailing thoughts about reflecting back on last year. And the first prevailing thought for me when it comes to the Bills linebackers in 2021, and when we talk Bills linebackers, we mean Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmunds, right? The big thing that sticks out to me is how the health of those two players improved in 2021 compared to 2020. Think back to 2020. Matt Milano only started 5 games. That's it. He played in 10 games, right? Kind of some of those situations where they would sprinkle him in at times, but he wasn't healthy. He only started 5 games. And then coming out of 2020, he signed that contract extension, and we were all really happy. But the piece of caution that came in with Milano was, can he hold up? Well, in 2021, he started 16 of 17 games and played well. Tremaine Edmunds, kind of focusing in on the health component of this. You know, he played through injury in 2020. I thought that was pretty apparent, the shoulder. And then he came back and started 15 of 17 games in 2021. So the health of Milano and Edmunds was much better in 2021 compared to 2020, and the defense played a lot better as well. Now, focusing in on their individual performances, Milano, he played extremely well. You know, he's a player that, as I was preparing for today's podcast, you know, he's a big deal for this team. You know, he's a draft pick, obviously, guy that signed a lucrative extension. But we just don't spend a lot of time talking about him because we know exactly what he is. He's a good football player. And last season was a good embodiment of who he is. He played extremely well. He creates big plays, 3 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries last year. He thrives as a matchup linebacker, as a pursuit-style linebacker that thrives in space. Milano is really important for this defense, and he plays well. He's good in coverage. And one thing that I do want to reiterate, and I've brought this up a few different times on this podcast because, quite frankly, I had to answer a lot of questions about this coming out of the 2020 season, and it is the Bills' defense's ability to cover tight ends. And you guys remember, 2020, the Bills did not do well defending tight ends. And the entire offseason, I kept on saying, folks, Milano's not healthy. Like, he's the guy that changes that dynamic. That he's the guy that allows the Bills to handle tight ends the way they want to. And I want to go back and remind you of these numbers. So in 2021, last year, the Bills gave up 54 catches and 629 yards to tight ends. That's the second fewest amount of catches in the NFL, second fewest amount of yards. 2020, the year that Matt Milano only started 5 games, the Bills gave up 92 catches, the most in the NFL to tight ends, 993 yards, the second most in the NFL to tight ends. Matt Milano was hurt. All right, let's go back to 2019 when you get a healthy Matt Milano. 59 catches, 557 yards. That's the third fewest catches, second fewest yards. 2018, healthy Matt Milano, 49 catches, 512 yards. That's the second fewest catches and the fewest yards. Matt Milano is the guy that is so important to this defense in terms of what he can do defending tight ends in coverage. And so, as you see a 4-year sample size, where the year that Matt Milano only started 5 games, the Bills were the worst in the league at defending tight ends, than the other 3 seasons where you have a healthy Matt Milano, and the Bills are literally the best. Literally the best. So I say all that to emphasize Matt Milano's ability in coverage and what he means for the defense's ability to match up with tight ends. It was awesome having a healthy Matt Milano, rock solid football player. As for Tremaine Edmunds, folks, go back and listen to the entire Tremaine Edmunds podcast that I did on July 1st. You know, I gave you 35 minutes of pure conversation on Tremaine Edmunds, what he is, and his impact on the defense. If you really want to get the in-depth thoughts, that's what you need to do. Go back and listen to that one, because I don't want to sit here and rehash it. But Tremaine Edmunds continues to mean a lot to this defense. I understand that his play can be uneven, and there are some missed plays that really stand out. But the role that he fills, the leadership component, his skill set, and what that allows the Bills to do in terms of spacing the field, what he's responsible for as a run defender and in coverage, structurally based on the way that this defense is engineered, he means a lot to this defense. I understand, like I said, he's not the most consistent football player. There's meat left on the bone for sure, but he plays an important role for this defense. Go back and listen to that July 1st pod if you want all of my analysis. Real quick on 3 depth players, Tyler Medikevich, Tyrel Dotson, Andre Smith. You know, those guys haven't really proven themselves within the structure of the defense, but they're all 4-phase special teams players. You know, Tyler Medikevich, we'll talk more about him in just a few minutes, but, you know, played in all 17 games, 4-phase special teams guy, you know, one of the best special teams players in the league. Tyrel Dotson, another 4-phase special teamer. Andre Smith as well. So the Bills get good value out of their starters because they're on the field every single snap. And then the reserves, you know, they're key for this Bills special teams operation. And so it's somewhat concerning because you haven't seen a lot of this depth play, but we've seen them play special teams and they bring value to the Buffalo Bills in that regard. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Friends at Built Bar have given coconut brownie chunk the puff treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listening. They are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. And the coconut brownie chunk puffs, they're only here for a limited time. So go to Built.com to make sure that you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. And like I said, they're healthy for you. And I love that all Built Bars, they're made with collagen protein, which your body actually absorbs more efficiently and provides a lot of health benefits to you. It's awesome to eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Try them out now. Go to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. So what is new about the Bills linebacker core in 2022 compared to 2021? Well, the Bills said goodbye to A.J. Klein, a guy that spent a couple of seasons as a primary backup to Milano and Edmunds, and when everyone was healthy and they wanted to go 3 linebackers, A.J. Klein was a guy that stepped on the field for that. And, A.J. Klein also a meaningful special teams player for the Bills. And that's pretty much the only subtraction. Now, they welcomed in 2 draft picks, Terrel Bernard out of Baylor in the 3rd round, Balen Spector, a linebacker out of Clemson, in the 7th round. And then they signed Markel Lee, who spent part of the 2021 offseason with the Bills, didn't make the roster, and I think he went back to the Raiders. And so that's what they did. So what does that tell me? Well, first of all, it tells me that the Bills prioritized finding some young athletic players, double dipping in the draft with Bernard and Spector, but also double dipping with 2 guys that are really plus athletes. Bernard, a really exceptional athlete, a little undersized, but man, he can run. And the same is true about Balen Spector. And so it felt like the Bills wanted to get a little younger, but also get a little bit more athletic. And they got 2 plus athletes in Bernard and Spector. The other thing that it looks like they wanted to add, now A.J. Klein they cut, and there was some big cap savings to be had by saying goodbye to A.J. Klein. I felt like it was very much a formality that he would be cut, but they also still wanted to replace some of that veteran experience that they lost by bringing in Markel Lee, who's been in the league for a while, has had some years where he started for the Raiders. And so they're able to maintain some veteran depth and experience by bringing in Markel Lee. And let's be real here. I mean, the Bills invested a 3rd-round pick on Terrel Bernard. And I look at day 2 players as developmental starters, guys that you think that within a reasonable amount of time, a couple of seasons, will be a starter for you. I think 1st-round guys, they're obviously impact starters, guys that you feel like pretty early in their career can start for you. Day 2, a little bit more of a developmental appeal, but a guy that you envision to start for your team. And then day 3 is more developmental depth. You take some swings on traits, those types of things. Later on, more special teams focus, getting competition for certain position groups where you have numbers. And so the Bills made Terrel Bernard a 3rd-round pick, and to me, that says something. That says something about, first of all, what they see in Terrel Bernard, but also there's a vision for him on this defense. And let's actually go right into that, because the lead question that I have in the biggest questions now and in the future is, what is the plan for Terrel Bernard? Again, a 3rd-round pick. And I've even had a mental journey with this selection. When the Bills immediately made that pick, and I was doing the live broadcast for the draftnetwork.com, my initial reaction had a lot of confusion about it. I wasn't a fan of the pick. And in my mind, the reason that I came to that conclusion was I thought the Bills would draft a linebacker, but also draft a linebacker that you could look at as an option to replace Tremaine Edmunds if you weren't able to bring him back after this season. And so when I was reflecting on that pick initially, I didn't look at Terrel Bernard as a Tremaine Edmunds replacement. I don't think there's a lot of similarities between those 2 players. And I thought to myself, well, this is more of a Matt Milano type player, but he's locked up for the next 3 seasons. The more I thought about it, the more I have become convinced that the plan for Terrel Bernard isn't to eventually replace Tremaine Edmunds. The plan for Terrel Bernard is to provide the Bills a 3rd linebacker. A guy that, if they want to go 4-3 base defense, they can do it with Terrel Bernard, who also gives you a ton of range and athleticism to play in the overhang and even serve as a big slot, right? A Buffalo nickel, if you will, where you can have 3 linebackers on the field, but also maintain your nickel principles with what Terrel Bernard can offer from a coverage perspective. And the more that you think about the dynamics of the Buffalo Bills and the context of the AFC East and the AFC in general, you're going to have to be able to defend the run and also handle a wide range of offensive attacks that are predicated on creating some mismatches from the slot by using tight ends flexed out, right? And even some of these really good pass catching backs. And so I think having versatility in that nickel defender role to be able to use a Teron Johnson as your primary slot defender. But if there are matchups that you like where Bernard brings a size element that can help you match up with a tight end maybe a little bit more effectively, or you still want to be able to play your nickel defense but have a little bit more size to defend the run, you like having an option like Terrel Bernard at your disposal. We've talked about this. There's a lot of teams in this AFC that are going to want to run the football. And you start right with the AFC East, where the Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins, their bread and butter is running the football. You've got, Kyle Shanahan, disciples in Miami and with the Jets. Those teams are going to run the football wide zone. You better be able to handle it. The New England Patriots, we know their entire operation is predicated on running the football. The entire AFC North is a run-heavy division. The Titans, the Colts, and then even in the AFC West where you might think more passing, you still want to be able to bring those teams to your place in the playoffs, cross country, come on over from Vegas, come on over from LA. You want to have those teams come to your place and play in the cold, and they're probably going to want to have to run the football. And so I think having a trusty third linebacker is an element of this defense that is a good thing. And so I think that's the vision for a guy like Terrel Bernard. Number 2 for me in terms of my biggest questions now and in the future is probably number 1 for a lot of people. Can Tremaine Edmunds make more splash plays? That's kind of been the messaging that we've heard from Leslie Frazier in terms of what he's looking for out of Tremaine this year. The good news about that is when you think about splash plays, it comes down to instincts and athleticism. Well, the athleticism component Tremaine Edmunds has in waves. The instincts component is something that has gotten better, I think, consistently throughout his career. But I think the third piece that we don't acknowledge enough is, linebackers, every linebacker in the world is better when they don't have to play through traffic, okay? I sat here and watched, I had to do a roster presentation for the Draft Network on the Chicago Bears on Monday. And so on Monday morning, in anticipation of doing that presentation, I sat there and watched 3 games of the Bears in 2021. And I'm focusing in on Roquan Smith. And Roquan Smith is a really good player in terms of playing in space and in coverage and running, and he's got range. But guess what? When he's got to play through trash, he's got to get through traffic, he's not as effective. So I'm hopeful that an improved defensive tackle situation will allow Tremaine Edmunds to be a little bit more free to flow to the football. And we talked about this yesterday on the podcast where the Bills gutted that defensive tackle room. The only guy that's back is Ed Oliver. The other 3 players are brand new. You swapped out Lotulelei, Harrison Phillips, and Vernon Butler for Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, and Jordan Phillips. And while that should make your defensive tackle room better, it should also have an impact on the linebackers and allow Tremaine Edmunds to be more free-flowing to the football. Obviously, it's a contract year for Tremaine Edmunds. So there's a lot on the line this year for the Bills middle linebacker. Next up, number 3 for me. Can Matt Milano become a better tackler? I love Matt Milano. Love him. But a piece of his game that has been inconsistent his entire career has been being a consistent finisher. So far for his career, right at about 15% of the time that he goes to make a tackle, he misses it. 14.8%. And it's not like he's had inconsistencies where one year he was good and other years where he was bad. Every season for his career has been above a 12.3% missed tackle rate. Now, the Bills' defense as a whole tackled much better last year than they've done in previous years under Sean McDermott. And, you know, if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, we've talked a lot about missed tackles on defense. It got better last year. But a guy that is still lagging behind is Matt Milano. You know, something about Tremaine Edmunds that improved last year was the missed tackling. He only missed 7.5% last year, which you'll take all day long. And in his first 3 seasons, he was around 13%. So he nearly cut that in half. Would love to see Matt Milano do the same. Would love to see that 14, 15% that he's been at get into the 7-8 range. Now, you know, Matt Milano doesn't have the length, right? He's got 32-inch arms, which is, I think, right about the 30th percentile for linebackers. So tackling outside of his frame, right, and just having more of a tackle radius because you have more length, not something that he has compared to a Tremaine Edmunds who has, you know, a massive wingspan and arm length. So that helps a guy like Edmunds, but I would like to see more tackling consistency out of Matt Milano. I think that's a low-hanging fruit area where this defense can get better. Right? Missed tackles, they're a big deal, right? Like, the offense gets more yards because you didn't get the guy down. Another big offender with missed tackles is Trey White. That's another thing that I think he can get a lot better at, but we're not talking corners today. Number 4 is, what is Tyrel Dodson's role? Tyrel Dodson's a fascinating player to me because this is his 4th season. I mean, he's been around 3 years in this system, and the Bills have kind of stuck with him, right? UDFA, had that suspension, has had some injuries, but he's continued to have an opportunity with this football team. This is year 4. Can he be the primary backup to Edmunds and Milano? I'm really interested in him. What is his role? And some of these questions are simply questions where I speculate. Some of them I might have an answer for you. This is one of those times where it's, hey, I don't know what the answer is here, but I'm curious. It's a question that I have about this room. Because the linebacker depth is, you know, it's hard to really know what the Bills have. I'm talking about a rookie in Terrel Bernard and guys that have been around but haven't really played but have played special teams. Do we really know what the Bills have in Tyrel Dodson and Andre Smith and Joe Giles Harris? You know, it's a little confusing. But the guy that's the most interesting to me is Tyrel Dodson because this is year 4 for him. Number 5 is, does the team stick with Andre Smith? Player that they traded for, gave up like a 7th-round pick from the Panthers, have signed him to an extension. But he also is facing a 6-game suspension to start the season. Now, you could very easily just let him serve the suspension. Obviously, he doesn't take up a roster spot. And then 6 weeks into the season, you can kind of make a decision on Andre Smith. And, you know, if you want to keep him, right, you'll have to activate him, which means you'll have to clear up a roster spot, which could happen naturally due to an injury or something like that. But I'm curious if everyone's healthy and Andre Smith serves his suspension. When that suspension's up, what's the plan? That'll be fascinating for me to find out. The last thing that I have down under my questions is, do the Bills keep 6? Do the Bills roster 6 linebackers? I kind of like to see them roster 5. But they typically roster 6 and they dress them, right? They play special teams. The Bills will have 3 or 4 linebackers that are four-phase special teamers. And I think that's a bit of a consequence of the Bills' RB3 position not being a guy that can play special teams, whether that's been TJ Yeldon or Matt Breida. You know, that third guy that the Bills have rostered at running back has only been able to dress if one of the top 2 backs was banged up because they don't help you on teams. Well, one thing that could be interesting about the roster construction in terms of numbers is if you keep 5 linebackers, that would allow you to dress your RB3 and say that RB3 is Zach Moss. Zach Moss, if he could play special teams, I think he brings a little bit more value from scrimmage in terms of what he offers in pass protection and the idea of him as a short yardage back. But I think that's going to be a challenging thing for a guy like Zach Moss, who's never played a down of special teams in the NFL, when you have all these four-phase special teams guys at linebacker. And so I say all that to say is, you know, do they keep 6? Do they keep 5? I think they will keep 6. And I look at Edmunds, Milano, Terrel Bernard, and Matakevich as 4 of the 6 locks. I think that Dotson is pretty much firm as the 5th guy. And then between Markel Lee, Joe Giles-Harris, and Balin Spector, you have 1 spot available for those 3 players. And so that's kind of where the position battle to me comes when I look at this linebacker core. So let's close out this podcast with my expectations for this unit. And I will just kind of hit you with one-liners for each player. And we'll start with Tremaine Edmunds. With Tremaine, it's take that step. It's a contract year. Eliminate some of the doubt that's out there. I'm fully aware of it, and I'm sure Tremaine is. But my God, this dude has haters. Like, there are Bills fans that do not like Tremaine Edmunds. What can he do to silence his critics? What can he do to make it obvious that the Bills need to hold on to this player? I'm certainly rooting for that to happen because I know what he means to this defense. I also am aware of some of his shortcomings and plays that are left on the field. But I'd encourage you to, if you're going to invest so much emotional energy into being critical of Tremaine Edmunds, please watch other linebackers. Pop on some NFL tape and see what it looks like to play Mike linebacker in the NFL. And I think you'll be surprised what you see in terms of if you were to put yourself in that mindset, if you were to pop on whatever tape you want to watch. I did it with the Chicago Bears on Monday. Pretend that you are a Chicago Bears fan like you are a Bills fan and watch Roquan Smith. Pop on the Buccaneers tape. Watch Devin White. Pretend you're a Buccaneers fan. Tell me how you feel. You can do it with any linebacker. So if you're going to invest all that emotional energy in not liking Tremaine Edmunds, do yourself a favor and familiarize yourself with what linebacker play looks like across the NFL and contrast it to Tremaine Edmunds, and I think you'll come away with a different perspective. Matt Milano, I'm looking for more of the same. Maybe some, less missed tackles like we've talked about. That would be outstanding. But, look, stay healthy, continue to perform at a high level, continue earning that contract as Tremaine Edmunds' running mate. For Tyler Matakevich, you are a special teams only player that is getting a $3.25 million salary in 2022. He's the 60th highest paid linebacker in the league. I need you to be a Pro Bowl caliber special teams player. Terrel Bernard, let us understand the vision the Bills have for you and let us like it. I think this guy's going to get a real chance to get on the field this year on defense, right? I think it's obvious that he'll play some teams, but I think he'll also have a role on the defense. I think it's very realistic that he could play 35% of the snaps. I'm really interested to see how the Bills deploy him. Tyrel Dodson, show us why the team has stayed committed to you. I look at Tyrel Dodson as kind of like the Ike Bucker of linebackers, where Ike Bucker was just always on the team, never really played, but then when he got his opportunity, he played pretty good. Can Tyrel Dodson be a similar type player in terms of that arc? And then between Joe Giles-Harris, Markel Lee, and Balin Spector, I just want one of them to prove that they are a roster-worthy player, because one of them is likely going to make the team. And so show why you deserve that, and then, hey, you're going to have a chance to play some teams. Showcase yourself well. I think that's a fair expectation for those three guys, one of them to emerge as a roster-worthy player. All right, folks, there it is. My thoughts on this Bills linebacker core entering the season. It's all about Edmunds. It's all about Milano. And then it's all about Terrel Bernard and the plan for him and the special teams contributions of the rest of the group. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. We still got the secondary to do. And one thing that I want to get done here very soon is I got a great comment from somebody on YouTube that said, hey, Joe, after all these positional conversations, I'm pretty hyped up and you're painting a pretty rosy picture, but what are the concerns? Like, what are the big things? What are the roadblocks for the Bills this season? And so I think it would be wise of me to do a podcast very soon where, maybe we really kind of focus in on the other side of the coin and not necessarily paint a doomsday scenario, but be honest about some of the issues that this team could face this year. And so you can expect that episode coming really soon as well. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you are subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.